strength from within. But the body, what? The body wants to take pleasure in the world, and it remembers the world. It remembers the moment where you just drank away your stress. But you can't do that now. So we do this in the wilderness, or we did that in the wilderness, and so we will do it again in the promised land, just like the people of Israel. And that's why we need to stay awake. At the end of verse 5, it says, to accomplish what he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so from Genesis to Deuteronomy, it continues to talk about this. If you turn to chapter 7 of Deuteronomy, it says, chapter 7, verse 8, but it was because the Lord loved you and kept the oath he swore to your forefathers that he brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the land of slavery, from the power of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. So the people of Israel were brought out from Egypt. Why? Because he kept the oath he swore to your forefathers. And so in Genesis 2, didn't we just read how Abraham would be given descendants, but that those descendants will be taken as slaves for 400 years, but once the time comes, I will take the people of Amorites down and bring your descendants into the land. And so it is based on this oath that the people of Israel were brought into the promised land, not because they were righteous. And so in the same way that we did not receive salvation based on what we did right, the people of Israel were brought into the promised land because of a promise, because of an oath. So let's look at us. Who among us was right or righteous that we received salvation? We were predestined from the beginning. God wanted to fulfill his plans. It wasn't because we are well off or we are well educated or because there was something worthy in us that merits salvation. And so again, how humble should we be before God? But do we not hear people who say, oh, I prayed so much to God and I went to church so diligently, and that is probably why I received salvation. But that does not serve as the basis for one's salvation. Please go back to Deuteronomy chapter 9. In the end, or the last part of verse 5, to accomplish what he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So he did not make this promise just to Abraham, but he says this to the descendants of Abraham as well, and the descendants of those descendants. And so the promise continues to be carried down. And the people are reminded of that oath again and again. So we saw how God carries out his plans and how he fulfills his oath from Genesis to all the end of the Bible. So we have to think about how blessed we are, because the New Testament and the New Testament, that also means promise, whether it be old or new. You have a testament. You have words, a promise from God that brought the people of Israel out of Egypt. All these things happened because of his promise. And so my salvation and me entering into the promised land are all a result, all results of his promise. So after verse 5, what does it talk about? He talks about what kind of people the people of Israel are, what kind of people you were in the past, what kind of state, what kind of mind you had. So he reveals that to the people, and he actually humiliates them. You are arrogant. You think that you can enter, that you are entering the land because of what you did. And you are telling me to do this and that, acting as though I owe you something, but that's not the case, is what God is saying. If you read the news today, for instance, you have a lot of refugees coming in from Syria and other parts of Europe. And so they go to all parts of Europe. And because there is so much, the number is so high, there are some countries that accept them, but there are other countries that do not. And you have refugees because of civil wars. And due to these internal conflicts, people die and they lose their jobs and so on. And because they face death, they escape their own home country and go to other countries seeking refugee status. And so if they are refugees, they might be in a similar situation like the Israelites. So at first, they might have welcomed the refugees, but because the number have grown so much, the governments started to restrict the number. So they would go into these lands. And at first, they thought, please accept me, accept me. But after they had been accepted, they say things like, why don't you build houses? And why do you not give me water and food? How can we withstand this cold weather? So, even though they had been accepted as a refugee, they complain, saying, give me food and water and give me a job. And so, in the same way, the people of Israel, they were slaves, if you remember, in Egypt. Do you think that they were well fed as slaves in Egypt? Still, they had to come out of the slavery, and in the same way as the refugees, they say, do you want to kill us by giving us no food? When are you going to give me meat? So, as for the refugees, they had come out of their own countries on their own, but as for the Israelites, they had been carried out by God. So, do you not think that God would take care of them or not? That is where you find the difference. God took the people of Israel out from Egypt and had an oath. If they waited, then they would have been given food and clothes. But before long, they started to complain. And so they did not disobey, or they did not obey God's words. Instead, they complained first. And that's what the next part of this will explain from verse 6. Understand then. So there is something they need to know, that they need to understand. And God is telling us that we need to understand this too, that we must know the following, that it is not because of your righteousness that the Lord your God is giving you this good land to possess. For you are a stiff-necked people. So what must you understand? That you are a stiff-necked people. What does that mean? What does it mean to be stiff-necked? Do we not say this about a person? Don't we say that too about people? People who don't listen, people who are stubborn, people who are proud and not obedient. To such people we say that they're stiff-necked. So the people of Israel are stiff-necked people, God is saying. You are stubborn, you complain, and you're arrogant. Don't listen to others. You are not obedient to God. That's what you have to know. Is he not saying the same thing to us? That we, too, are stiff-necked, arrogant, and full of ourselves, self-centered, and not listening to others. That's the kind of people we are. Are you not? Tell me. Oh, but I don't think so. Is that what you're saying? If he says understand, then we must understand. Do you think that God will tell us that we are stiff-necked people if we are disobedient? Or if we are obedient? He is not calling out a few among the people of Israel. He's saying that all of you are stiff-necked. And then he calls out examples in order for them to see themselves. Verse 7. Remember this and never forget how you provoked the Lord your God to anger in the desert. He didn't just become angry a little bit, he was enraged. That is what you have to remember. We don't have time to read everything here, but he talks about what happened in Horeb, that's Sinai. So from Egypt, they crossed the Red Sea into the wilderness. And at the tip of the Sinai Peninsula, you have Horeb, Mount Horeb. So Mount Horeb and Mount Sinai, they both mean the same thing. So it only took them 2 months to arrive at Mount Horeb from Egypt, and here they camped for 11 months. And so while they were camping in this place for 11 months, Moses was called by God. And at the top of that mountain, what does he receive? He was given a stone tablet of the 10 Commandments that God himself had written for them. Verse 8. At Horeb you aroused the Lord's wrath so that he was angry enough to destroy you. When I went up on the mountain to receive the tablets of stone, the tablets of covenant that the Lord had made with you, I stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. I ate no bread and drank no water. The Lord gave me 2 stone tablets, inscribed by the finger of God. On them were all the commandments of the Lord proclaimed to you on the mountain, out of the fire on the day of the assembly. At the end of the 40 days and 40 nights, the Lord gave me the 2 stone tablets, the tablets of the covenant. Then the Lord told me, go down from here at once, because your people whom you brought out of Egypt have become corrupt. They have turned away quickly from what I commanded them and have made a cast idol for themselves. And the Lord said to me, I have seen this people, and they are a stiff-necked people indeed. Let me alone, so that I may destroy them and blot out their name from under heaven. And I will make you into a nation stronger and more numerous than they. So Moses had been given the stone tablets and came down. But below the mountain, the people of Israel were saying what? They said, well, Moses has not come down for 40 days. Maybe he's dead. Who knows? We have so many days left ahead of us to cross this land. So we need an idol, we need a God. We need a God that can lead us. So let us take out all of our gold and create a God out of this gold. And so Aaron, who should have stopped the people, actually went ahead of them and created this idol. Moses said that he was not a good speaker, and that is why he said, how can I go in front of Pharaoh? He only looked at the weakness that he had. He didn't know what how God would work through him. And because of that, he said, take your brother, Aaron, who is a good speaker. But if Moses had been completely trusting of the Lord, then he would not have trusted his brother. And that's why the both of them went. But that brother who he trusted, who he confided in, who knew that Aaron, would have gone to create this golden calf, an idol for the people of Israel later. And so understand, it is said, that the people of Israel had provoked the Lord into anger. But despite this mistake, God still does what? He brings them into the land of the promise because of the oath that he had made to their forefathers. So God exposes all of these mistakes, not just from the beginning, not the thing that they did wrong from the beginning, but throughout this journey. So because you are such a stiff-necked people, you should know that you are not qualified to enter the promised land. You, from the very beginning, are a stiff-necked people. From the day that you had been delivered out of Egypt, you complained against God, is what he is saying here. And that's why, with your righteousness, you are not able to enter the promised land. So let us now look at ourselves. From the day that we have been saved until now, was there not a day that you had resented God? Or did you not live a sinful life? Did you always please God? Despite this, we say what? Or despite this, God is leading us into a promised land. Not because we are right, not because we are well off, but because of an oath. And so it says in here that the people of Israel tested God more than 10 times. That God had been provoked to anger, and that they aroused the Lord's wrath, that they were a people that was not at all worthy of his grace, but still, because of an oath that he made, they were allowed to enter the promised land. Verse 12, Then the Lord told me, Go down from here at once, because your people whom you brought out of Egypt have become corrupt. So here you find something interesting, because it says, because your people whom you brought out of Egypt have become corrupt. Instead of God saying my people, he brings the people of Israel down to the level of Moses' people here. I'm sure that Moses was feeling very, very humiliated here. Now, verse 13, it says, And the Lord said to me, I have seen this people, and they are a stiff-necked people indeed. Let me alone, so that I may destroy them and blot out their name from under heaven, and I will make you into a nation stronger and more numerous than they. So now I'd like to select you to be the beginning of a nation, is what the Lord is saying here. If that were given to us, then wouldn't you have said, "Oh, I'd be very, very honored"? But that's not what Moses says. Instead, he says, no, the people here, they are not my people, they are your people. If you kill them all and do not lead them into the promised land, then the surrounding nations would say what? They would say that God, who is so powerful, probably he is not so powerful because he has selected another nation. So you should not do that in the sake, for the sake of your name. So even for the sake of your name, forgive them and bring them into the promised land. And so in order for that to happen, he goes into the mountain again and prays for 40 days. Then once again I fell prostrate before the Lord, it says in verse 18, for 40 days and 40 nights I ate no bread and drank no water because of all the sin you had committed, doing what was evil in the Lord's sight, and so provoking him to anger. But again, the Lord listened to me, it says here. So because of this prayer from Moses, God forgave the people of Israel, and he brought the people of Israel into the promised land. Now verse 20 it says, And the Lord was angry enough with Aaron to destroy him, but at that time I prayed for Aaron too. So here too he prayed for Aaron. This is not written in Exodus. If you read chapter 31, for instance, it only talks about how Moses prayed for the people there. And so only here he prayed, does it say, mention that he prayed for Aaron. Aaron had to be certainly put to death because he led the people to create the idol, the golden calf. But do you know what what Aaron said? He said that the people incited him to do this. That he threw the gold into the fire, and out came the golden calf. But a calf? Can a calf be molded like that automatically? So Aaron even lies, but still Moses prays for Aaron. And that's just like Jesus, who intercedes for us. Just like Jesus, who is praying for us in the celestial temple as the intercessor. So because of this incident, Moses prays 4 times. He prays 4 times for God to forgive them. Not just once, but 4 times. And that's why God changes his mind. And even has Aaron. So Aaron should have certainly died because of that incident, but was spared because of Moses' prayer. So even the leader of a people, even a teacher, can make mistakes, you can see here. But whenever you have that mistake, there is Jesus who intercedes for them. We today can be spared of punishments, and we can still live our lives like this, laughing and so on, because of the prayers that Jesus makes on our behalf. Please turn now to Hebrews. Hebrews chapter 7. It's not chapter 7, but chapter 8. Actually, it is chapter 8, sorry. Chapter 7, verse 25. Therefore, he is able to save completely those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede for them. So before God, Jesus prays, he continues to intercede for us. And that is the only reason why we are able to live in happiness. So his intercession is not for the unborn again or the Gentiles, but for the people, his people. So his intercession again is not for sinners. And so the people of Israel had Moses' prayer, and that's why they were spared. And in the same way, Aaron was also spared because of Moses. And so Moses was a shadow of Jesus as the person who interceded for the people of Israel. So when God looks at us, from the day that we were saved until now, we are a people of disobedience. Let's go back to Deuteronomy again, chapter 9, verse 24. Chapter 9, verse 24. You have been rebellious against the Lord ever since I have known you. So, since when were we rebellious? From the day that he came to know us. So then, what must you remember? You, below the Mount Sinai, created the golden calf. So you have that incident. And then he also reminds them of what they did. Verse 20, chapter 9, verse 20. And the Lord was angry enough with Aaron to destroy him, but at that time I prayed for Aaron too. Also I took that sinful thing of yours, the calf you had made, and burned it in the fire. Then I crushed it and ground it to powder as fine as dust, and threw the dust into a stream that flowed down the mountain. And so it was crushed and ground up. So as long as it is made by man, it is completely useless and meaningless before God. So anything that is created by man is meaningless. That's what this means. So not only did they make a mistake by creating this golden calf, but they also did the following. Verse 22, you also made the Lord angry at Taberah, at Massah, and Kibroth, and Hattaabah. So not only at Mount Hebron, but also in these places, God was angry. Let's see what happened there. Please turn to Numbers chapter 11. Let's first look at what happened in Taberah. Numbers chapter 11. Verse 1, now the people complained about their hardships in the hearing of the Lord, and when he heard them, his anger was aroused. Then fire from the Lord burned among them and consumed some of the outskirts of the camp. When the people cried out to Moses, he prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down. So that place was called Taberah, because fire from the Lord had burned among them. And so here too Moses prayed to God. What happened? They complained. And what happened? God heard their complaints. When we complain, can God hear us or not? Of course he can. And so we should not resent God easily, because he hears it. Your complaints and your resentments, he hears them, and that provokes God to anger. Please turn now to Malachi. Page 1330, Malachi chapter 3, verse 16. Then those who fear the Lord talked with each other, and the Lord listened and heard. A scroll of remembrance was written in his presence concerning those who fear the Lord and honored his name. So not only does he listen, but he also does what? He writes. He records. So not only the resentments and complaints written, so in various places throughout the Bible, it talks about how God hears the complaints of the people and is provoked to anger. And also in Deuteronomy, it talks about this. Please turn now to Deuteronomy chapter 1. Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 34. When the Lord heard what you said, he was angry and solemnly swore. What do you think he heard? He has heard the people grumble against him, because it says in verse 27, "You grumbled in your tents and said, 'The Lord hates us, so he brought us out of Egypt to deliver us into the hands of Amorites to destroy us.'" So they said this without any qualms. And this kind of grumbling was heard by God, and therefore he was provoked into anger. So did God bring them out of Egypt in order to kill them? No. But all these assumptions, all these guesses and speculations and immediate thoughts of the people were heard by God. And also in chapter 5 it says, Deuteronomy chapter 5. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 28. "The Lord heard you when you spoke to me, and the Lord said to me, 'I have heard what this people said to you. Everything they said was good.'" So the conversation between Moses and the people were heard by God. The God here is talking about how the people heard him speak out of fire. And because they feared hearing God's voice out of fire, they said to Moses, "It is too scary for us to hear the word of God coming directly from the fire. So you, Moses, listen to it and speak to us." And that's what God's saying was correct, or it was good. And so all of our conversations is heard by God. And so if you say, for instance, to God, "I did not say that, I don't remember." If you say this, do you think that it'll pass? No. God will probably show you exactly what you said. He'll probably rewind the tape that he recorded and play it for you so that you remember. So in the wilderness, people did not have things to eat and drink. And he knows this because he has set up that situation for you to become humble. There is nothing you can gain by complaining. And of course, God, hearing their complaints, who said, "Let me eat meat and this and that." But in Psalms, doesn't it say that their sores were made weary, that their spirits had become weary, although they had been given the things that they requested. So although they were given the things that they had cried out for, their spirits had all withered because they made these requests out of complaint. Please turn to chapter 9, Deuteronomy chapter 9 again. Chapter 9, verse 22. "You also made the Lord angry at Taberah, at Massah, and at Kibroth, and Hattaavah." So in these three other places too, they resent God. And you find these stories in Exodus and Numbers. And so in the plains, they complain against God for not having food, not having water, and the heat. All of these things should have not been made as complaints, is what God is saying. Verse 23, "And when the Lord sent you out to Kadesh Barnea, he said, 'Go up and take possession of the land I have given you.' But you rebelled against the command of the Lord your God. You did not trust him or obey him." And so from Sinai to Taberah, all these other places, and after 38 for 38 years they spent in Kadesh Barnea, And at the very end, they were given the command to go up and take possession of the land that God has given them. But still they rebelled against God. And so even to the very last minute, they disobey God. And so God exposes them of all these things that they did wrong. But in verse 24, what does it say? You have been rebellious against the Lord ever since I have known you. So from the beginning to the very end, the people of Israel were what? They were continuously disobedient of God. And you think what? Oh, these people, they're so foolish. But we need to remember that we are just like the people of Israel. From the day that we received salvation, we rebelled against God. We tested him. And we say things like, God is the one who saved me. But why is he putting me in this kind of difficult situation? Why does he not give me anything to eat and drink? Why does he not give me health? But all these difficulties that he had created for you is to discipline you, to train you. Because we are not obedient in this environment. Every time we read this verse, we should think, we are exactly like the people of Israel. So from the day that I received salvation to the time that I enter the millennial kingdom, none of it is done by me. I have been carried by your wings. It is through your grace that I have been able to come this far. That is what we need to realize. Now verse 25. I lay prostrate before the Lord these 40 days and 40 nights because the Lord had said he would destroy you. I prayed to the Lord and said, O sovereign Lord, do not destroy your people, your own inheritance, that you redeemed by your great power. God said to Moses, this is your people. Let them die. But until the very end, Moses says what? No, this is not my people, but your people. So please forgive them. Now verse 27. Remember your servant Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Overlook the stubbornness of this people, their wickedness and their sin. So God hears the prayer and forgives them. In the same way, Jesus prays as our intercessor and is saying the very things that Moses has said here. This people, they are full of sin and they are wicked, but through Jesus Christ you save them, and so overlook their stubbornness and their wickedness and their sin and forgive them. Why? Because I have paid for all of their sins. So please look at me and overlook the people. We have that prayer of intercession. And when we look at the prayer of Moses, we can guess what kind of prayer Jesus is making for us. In verse 27 again, it says, Remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The individuals that you gave an oath to. They are slaves in Egypt, but they will be brought into a land that is currently possessed by someone else, but will be eventually possessed by you. So again, Moses is the one who is interceding for the people of Israel. And so in the same way, we should also pray like Moses. This is how we have to pray in order to get something from God. We have to say, God, you are the one who promised this way, and so you have to fulfill it. So when Moses prayed, did he pray according to his thoughts? No, he went back to what God said and said, no, you promised to do this, and that is why you have to continue to fulfill it. And so, how, in the same way, one thing that or one way that we need to pray is for us to hold on to a promise that God made. Let's say that, for instance, that I am hungry and I have nothing to eat. But in the Bible it says, I have not seen a righteous man go hungry. Let's say that you saw that verse in the Bible. I have become a righteous person because of you. So if my children go hungry because of you, then it would defame your name. And so it is for this reason that you have to give me something to eat. He then therefore is tied down to what he said. You have to keep the promise that is said here. And so if you hold on to the verse that you found in the Bible and refer to it in praying, then God has no excuse. He has to fulfill what he said. So you have to tie him down to what he said. That is how we should pray. Verse 27 again. Remember your servants Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Genesis chapter 19 now. Genesis chapter 19, verse 29, let us read together. So when God destroyed the cities of the plain, he remembered Abraham, and he brought Lot out of the catastrophe that overthrew the cities where Lot had lived. So this is Sodom and Gomorrah. The reason why the family of Lot survived is not because of Lot, but because of Abraham. So just as Lot was saved because God remembered Abraham, God also delivers us out of this world, or has delivered us out of this world because he remembered Jesus. He saved us because of the promise he made in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And so think of how important it is for us to find all the promises that he made for us, because those promises are what we need to hold on to in praying to God. Please turn to Deuteronomy chapter 19 again, or chapter 9 again. Verse 28, otherwise the country from which you brought us will say, because the Lord was not able to take them into the land he had promised them, and because he hated them, he brought them out to put them to death in the desert. So see how well Moses prays to God. He says, your name will be made fun of by all people who say, oh, he's not able to take them into the land he promised. And furthermore, he hated them and brought them out to put them to death. Now verse 29, but they are your people, your inheritance, that you brought out by your great power and your outstretched arm. They are your inheritance. They are your people. So if you forsake them, then all the other nations will say, oh, he is not powerful enough. He was able to deliver them out of Egypt, but he was not powerful enough to bring them into the land that he had promised them. If we learn to pray like Moses, if we can truly respect the name and fear any harm will be done on his name, do you not think that all your answers or prayers will be answered? So in reading Deuteronomy, I often find my heart really moved. And because of his name, it is because of his name that he continues to take care of us. And so that's the reason why we are grateful, and a reason why we can only but kneel before him and not be stiff-necked. So again, Christian life is about disobedience, and that disobedience gives you blessings. There's no one who is more conniving than a person who thinks, oh, I can receive things even when I do not disobey, or even when I do not obey. So if you think that you are not receiving something in your life, then really think about what it is that you are not obeying. The Bible tells us you should remember. Do you know what kind of a person you are? You have tested the Lord, you have disobeyed the Lord from the very beginning, but even still he has led you into the promised land. It is not because of what you did. When you hear this message, what are you reminded of? Lord, you truly loved me. You have met me with grace, and that is why I continue to survive until today, despite all my wickedness and all my sins. I am only able to enter the promised land, the millennial kingdom, because of your grace. And so let us remember that and be grateful. Now let us pray. Lord, our Father, we have been saved by you, but still we are filled with sins and we are a disobedient people. We continue to resent you as foolish people. All our foolishness, may you forgive them. And we implore that you will fulfill your promises. We exist in this world